Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Teacher Transition Expert Series. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Holly Owens. Holly is a podcaster, instructional designer, and former educator. And on this episode, we discuss all the tips and tricks to get into instructional design, what a day in the life looks like, and some extra hidden tips and knowledge for just the realities of the teacher transition process. So tune in, turn it up, and as always, let's get ready to do this. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leena Marie Saleh, the Edtech Guru. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me on this journey, for all the support that you give me, and for following along. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and let's get ready to do this. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Teacher Transition Expert Series. Today, we are so honored to be joined by Holly Owens. She's an instructional designer and a podcast host, which I actually was just recently on, called EdUP Edtech. So, Holly, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. I'm glad to be here, and I'm so excited that we get to chat again.
Me too. And this time we get to jam a little bit more about your side of the world. So really excited.
In the other seat,
Right?
Yeah, it's weird.
It is weird to be on the other side. Somebody asked me that and I was like, yeah, I was like so nervous. It was like nerve-wracking. Okay. So we always like to ask everyone basically how you got to where you are today. So if you could share a little bit of your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career out as a high school teacher, and then I fell in love with ed tech and instructional technology, which led me into higher education. And I did that for about 10 years, and that eventually transitioned into the role, actually evolved into instructional design. So doing trainings with faculty about how to design online hybrid courses. And this was all pre-COVID. So these things did exist pre-COVID. Not a lot of people know that. So I did a lot of work in higher education with that and just training the faculty and getting them prepared to teach online, making valuable, meaningful learning experiences for the learners. And I also teach myself. So, incorporating a lot of what I was training on into what I do so I can say that this does work and prove to the faculty and get that buy-in. And then most recently, I transitioned from education to the corporate space in instructional design. So now I'm a full-time instructional designer at Amazon Pharmacy, where we design e-learnings for all types of stakeholders, learners, different agents across all the pillars of the pharmacy. And that's my story, is just, it eventually education led me to ed tech, and then ed tech turned into instructional technology, which in turned into ID, and then it led me to corporate and Amazon. Very windy road, but fun.
It is a windy road, but it's a good road. It's good to see, that there are pathways. I think so often we'll talk about some of the ways that you decided to leave and like all of those types of things. But I think so often people think that they just have to go from the classroom to ed tech, and that seems like a natural transition, but there's a whole other side of the world where actually educators' skills will kind of naturally fit. You moved from high school to higher ed. So was there any like defining factor of why you kind of made the jump to higher ed?
Well, not to share a bad story, but I had a very violent fight in my classroom the last year, and it just was like, and also there's a culmination of things, like all educators can relate to this. So much paperwork, all the different things that you have to do as an educator that don't require your creative mind of teaching. Like teaching becomes the very minimal part of what you do, and that's the part you love the most. So that fight in combination with not feeling like my voice was being heard or I was able to express my creative self really led me to like, gotta try something else. I actually hopped into e-learning development, government contracting for a hot minute before transitioning into higher ed. So I got a little bit of the corporate taste early on in my career, but then I just went right back into my comfort zone in education. So like all teachers, it's just, I just wasn't feeling it. I could burn out, all those different things.
And I think everyone has like a defining moment for why they decide to leave and kind of transition out of the classroom. And I always like to share that because I think that so often people think, I mean, LinkedIn's changed a lot, and the world of how we like network and things have have shown a different kind of community. But, when we were making the transition and kind of those types of things, that sort of community didn't really exist. And
No.
so sometimes it could be way more isolating, I think, than it is now.
Yeah, it is. It was super isolating, and there's a lot of guilt around that.
Mhm.
So, even now, even with the supportive communities that have, you know, presented themselves at this point, there's still a lot of guilt around leaving that and your students and all the things that you did. Something that teachers definitely have to work through.
And it's okay. I think it's okay to feel that way, and that the teacher guilt doesn't, I don't know, sometimes it gets me and I'm like, "Oh, I think think about this," or, those types of things. But I think that the impact that we have outside of the space actually is much larger than
Yeah,
it would have ever been if we were in it.
absolutely. And I still teach. It's like I left the K through 12 space, but I teach in higher education, which fills my cup and getting that experience with learners. And a lot of them, are the same age as me or is a little bit older. Some are mainly more younger now because I age. But it's really like, I use a lot of what I learned as a teacher to be a great instructor, adjunct instructor in higher ed, which I love.
Yeah. You are an instructional designer at Amazon Pharmacy
Yeah.
segment. So, could you talk a little bit about what exactly is life like as an instructional designer? Because we know that is a highly sought after career pathway for exiting educators.
Yeah, absolutely. I think instructional design is just taking your lesson planning to another level. Like in daily life, you're just designing learning experiences for all types of stakeholders, not just like K through 12, like incorporating that tech and, making sure you have measurable learning objectives. That's all part of it, but you really have to think on a higher level and kind of push yourself outside the boundaries and confines of like state assessed courses. And my life at Amazon Pharmacy is like it's across pillars. So we have different types of departments. We have customer care agents, we have clinical customer care, we have a whole bunch of different things where we have to think of like what's the best way to teach this to this particular group of stakeholders. Whereas in the classroom, it's really you learn who your students are and you're able to differentiate really easily after the first few months. You know who learns this way or that way. And but with instructional design and out in the real world, it's always changing. So you have to be able to adapt and to assimilate to, what the content is, but also like the adult learners, like how do they learn andragogy and a little bit of pedagogy does play. I feel like they play together very nicely. So figuring that all out is really a part of what I do, like trying to be like education will never leave you, but trying to incorporate, in the highest level to make sure that one, for the business, it gets return on investment, and two, that the learners have a meaningful experience. Again, you're still doing that. You do that in education and you're doing that in the corporate space. So every day I'm just trying to think of new ways. Is it a simulation? Is it CBE? Is it project based? What's happening? What fits best with this group?
Because Amazon obviously is a very large company, probably larger than most teachers will have had experience, obviously, in. When you are designing these, like, instructional courses, are they typically in person? Are they virtual? What does the coursework essentially look like for your stakeholders?
We have a variety of different things that we do. So there's synchronous instructor led, there's ILT trainings, and then we have self-paced things like for compliance. So it's across the board. And because Amazon is so big and pharmacy is just a part of that, like everybody does it differently, but there's the ILTs, the VILT, virtual instructor led training, there's the asynchronous self-paced component. Just like in higher education, where you have to think about when you develop programs and you have to get them approved by certain bodies, we have accreditation expectations in pharmacy that we have to fulfill, and across different departments, the expectations or policies that drive what we do. So yeah, it's everything. It's really everything. It's not just, our team, we have a wonderful instructional design team in pharmacy, and we all agree that me simply handing us a PowerPoint and telling us to turn that into an interactive e-learning is not okay. It's not okay. And a majority of the team is made up of former educators. I will say that there are former educators. I think 3 out of the 6 of us, half the team is former educators.
Because you are in a space that like you said, compliancy and like all of these different things, is there a certain level of upskilling that you have to do in order to make sure that your stakeholder obviously is meeting the compliancy, but also just, being able to disseminate the information?
Yeah, you definitely have to know that you're aligning with the policies that are set by that accrediting body and making sure you're checking off all the boxes. Otherwise, we lose accreditation, just like a education institution will lose accreditation if they weren't fulfilling what the program had been approved to do. So that is some pressure to do that, but also you learn you're not the SME. So you rely on the SMEs to actually make sure that the content that you're developing, they review it meticulously, especially for those compliance type things. And you work together to make sure that that is all happening in the ecosystem. That way, you're not missing something. So there's a lot of different people involved. It's not the typical like ID SME, maybe graphic designer, e-learning developer. It's like it's a whole bunch of different people who are involved in the conversation.
I think that's just important for people to know that like ID is different everywhere you go. It's doesn't mean that it's necessarily what you're saying. Like you're just the subject matter expert and you're developing the content. There may be times where you're working with other subject matter experts to kind of, lean on them as the expert. And then you're basically delivering or creating the ways in which the content is delivered.
If you're somebody that really needs to know that structure and that it's always this, and this, and you have that sort of mentality, instructional design is not the field for you because it is always changing. And especially at places like Amazon and the big corporations, you have to be able to assimilate to change fast and be able to lean into innovation.
I think that's a really good aspect because even myself, like I did this sort of my own like instructional design or whatever, but it was really just me and just like a small team of people. But I've had to learn too that like, oh, I may not know this. I probably need to like go to somebody else and kind of rely on them. And it becomes more of like this collaborative effort rather than just me sitting in my four walls and planning my
Yeah.
lessons and thinking they're,
Yeah.
the best that they ever could be.
Right.
You
You're the
really get,
star of your own show when
yeah,
you have your
right.
own classroom.
Yeah. And you no longer become the star.
Yeah.
You're a star a little bit, but not really in the same way that you are in your classroom. So on that note, are there any specific skills or anything that you feel like makes somebody successful as an instructional designer?
Well, you have to be able to talk to people and ask them specifically for what you need. Like, it's really important that you know those specifics because you can get handed a project and you have to be able to tell where the gaps are so that you can ask the SMEs to fill in the gaps. So you have to be able to like make them understand what learning is and how that all works. I also think project management and instructional design is huge. Like I was, really taken aback by like setting the projects and the expectations for like how long something's going to take. Like me, if you assign me, I can do a lesson in a day, right? Like I'm a superstar. Yes, I can do a lesson in a day, but some of these projects are really lengthy, so you have to be able to break them down and then see each portion through, but also go back and evaluate where things may need to change. There might need to be other people involved. Like it's not linear at all. It's very iterative and like being able to project manage and knowing like when like if something is due 6 months from now and working backwards and figuring out how long you need to get this information or when you need to develop something or when you need to record the audio and then edit that. So like all the different pieces of it, putting it together, like you really have to know the specifics and really nail that down and be comfortable with it also changing.
Yeah, that's a good point because, in my work, we have like a whole production line. We have screen recorders, you have voiceover artists,
Yep.
you have graphic designers. And so and what you're saying is like you can design something super quick, but then now it's going through multiple stakeholders even along the way to be able to get your finished product. So I think project management is a really good one. And I think also feedback.
Yep.
Something that you have to learn is that it's not meant to hurt your feelings, obviously. It's not just your principal coming to you and giving you feedback about your lesson or your students. You could easily see if they were enjoying or not enjoying something or if it was
Yeah, like
working or not
right?
working.
You
Yeah.
get that feeling. When one has gone well and one has really bombed.
Yeah. So it's much more challenging, I think, sometimes as an instructional designer when getting that feedback. Are there any like what are some of your favorite ways to get feedback from your end stakeholders?
Obviously, surveys, like just having the data, the hard data and the information to refer back to is very important to me, but also having a conversation. Somebody on my team brought up today that we should incorporate like review sessions before it goes to like with everybody, not just on the instructional designer to say, hey, Smee, review this and give me feedback. So having that synchronous chat before it goes out into prod. So I think that's important too. And I think on like a more professional and personal level, in dealing with constructive criticism and not trying to take what they say personally, that took me a really long time because as a teacher, I feel like, I knew my thing. I like this is I can do this, but then getting into this ID world, it's like, whoo, it's a very, very steep learning curve for a lot of these things. No two projects are the same, just like no two students learn the same, and you really have to figure your way through it. I'm not trying, I mean, I
Mhm.
hope we're not scaring people with all
No,
this.
I don't think so. I think that a lot of times when I've talked to teachers who have actually like transitioned into instructional design, that tends to be some of the things that they didn't know about it. Like they just thought that they would come in and kind of design lessons and create curriculum or whatever.
And it,
But
it would be all pretty and like,
yeah,
add in all the ed tech fun and we're good to go.
yeah, and it is. But I think there's just a certain amount of like that reflective process that kind of comes into the picture because you're not used to having so many stakeholders give you so much feedback. I think to me, I love it. I'm like, oh yeah, give me all the feedback. Like
Yeah,
I may sulk for like a few minutes because sometimes it just
it's
kills
hard
you,
to
you
take.
know? You're like,
Yeah,
oh, okay,
yeah.
that was brutal, but okay, I get it. And then it kind of at the end of the day, it ends up making you better, I think.
I love that you're saying that. I love all the feedback too, because at this point in our careers, we can be a good judge of like, is that crap feedback that I really need to incorporate? Is that something like, is that something I really need to pay attention to from that particular stakeholder? So we can kind of evaluate and judge at this point what we need to take in and absorb and reflect on and then change. But then the other stuff, like, maybe that person just might not understand the learning process. And we could have a larger conversation with them.
Yeah, and there's a certain level of ownership that you take, right? Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I actually get to decide, is this good feedback or is this person just trying to give me their personal opinion about the feedback?" And I think that that's a certain sense that you don't necessarily get when you're in the classroom. It's like your principal's like,
Right.
"That was crap." And then you have to throw
Yeah.
the whole thing out the window and you're like, "Oh, okay, what but like I want to iterate and like make this better." And they're like, "No." And then you just have to like completely like switch gears. So
Yeah.
I think it's great that you get to be more reflective and more collaborative and you're right. Like you also get to have decision making, which is so
Mm.
huge.
Yes, absolutely. I want to say I love that power, but I love that ability to use all of the skills and knowledge I've gained over the years and incorporate that into what I'm doing. And I feel confident at this point about what I'm doing. And, even if it doesn't work, I'm okay with that. Like you have to
Mhm.
be okay with failure, especially in a corporate setting, because it does happen and it will happen to you. I feel like teachers put a lot of pressure on themselves to be perfect in every single lesson, no matter if you're doing it for elementary or high school when you're going through the different class periods. It's like every single lesson 7 times a day has to be perfect.
Mhm.
That's an unrealistic expectation.
It is. And something that sometimes I think carries with you as a hard lesson when you actually do transition is because you want to do everything perfect. So you're like, oh, I'll do that. Oh, I'll do that. I'll do that. And you just kind of have to dial back and be like, no, I want to get really good at this thing and skill set that I'm learning. And that you're right. It's not a bad reflection on you when you do fail
Mm.
either. And I think that's just a lesson that we learn along the
Yeah,
way too.
absolutely. I learned so much more when I do fail at things because I realized there were maybe features in a tool that I'm using that I didn't know about, or there was something that I missed along the way, maybe asking a certain question that I should be asking to all SMEs. Those are all learning opportunities for me. And as much as I've been in instructional design, the past 15 years, I'm still learning something new all the time and like something I can do better. My teammates, we all balance our strengths. It's so crazy how our strengths and weaknesses balance each other so well on the team. And I love that. Like when you have a team like that that just gels like that, it feels really good. And you produce that and in turn produces quality content and then meaningful learning.
Yeah. I love that. So let's switch gears just a little bit and then we'll talk about your podcast soon in
Okay.
just a few minutes. But You have become like quite the LinkedIn influencer regarding putting out content for teacher transitioners, and you constantly put out job postings. So maybe you could share with those who may not know you so well or that sort of thing, like what types of resources and things that you do put out for transitioners.
Yeah, I love to put out anything that's like a list, like a checklist, like a list of people who you should follow, a list of articles you should read if you're transitioning. So I recently put out like a curated ID resources for transitioning teachers, and really it's applicable to anyone. So that list is just continuing to change. And I have to give props to Kaylin Holt because she originally designed something similar to that. I just took it and kind of reformatted it in a way that the questions I was getting in LinkedIn messaging, like who do I follow? That's like the main one, or where do I go? Where do I start? Those conversations. So a lot of content around that, like digestible, palatable, like I can take this and I can use this right now. And then for the jobs, I always want to be this advocate around salary transparency because I see lots of people posting jobs and they just don't post the salary information. And I don't understand why that's a thing, especially in the States. And it's even worse abroad. When I try to do my international job postings on Wednesdays, finding roles that actually have the salary posted. So, my main thing is like people who are educators, especially those who've been in the classroom longer, and they've gotten to those different levels of salary, like those different steps or whatever it's called in your state. I want to make sure that they can still retain their livelihood. Like a lot of teachers, I feel like because they have this mentality, I was just a teacher, they're going to take a lower paying job because they feel like they have to build themselves up. I'm like, no, you have this, you have like your mid level. Like you should be applying at mid level experiences, not entry level. You're past entry level at this point, and you're just going to have to take the time to upskill. So Mondays and Fridays, I post US based roles in both education and corporate with they're either remote or hybrid, and they have salaries listed. And then on Wednesdays, I do international postings. So I look everywhere. I look Europe, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, you name it, Philippines, China, all the different places I look to see what's available. And then Wednesdays are dedicated to just those international roles.
So great though. I mean, it also takes a ton of time. So my hats
Yeah.
off to you to do that. I think people undervalue the amount of time that it actually takes to put out content.
You may say from start to finish, I time myself one time when I do those job postings, and now I've created some efficiencies around it. Takes me at the least 50 minutes.
Yeah,
One
I
just
believe
for
it.
one.
I
Just
believe
for
it.
one.
Even when I just like put out a LinkedIn post, I'm like, okay, I need to like really thoughtfully, intentionally think about these things. It's just
Yeah.
they do take a lot of time. I think it's an undervalued thing when you
It's
do
not
put those.
recognized. Right.
Yeah, it's not.
Unless you do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So we've gotten a lot of questions lately. I'm sure you have, as I have, about and seeing a lot of these like posts lately about do teachers who are looking to leave the space really need to be posting on
Um,
LinkedIn?
I would say you definitely need to have LinkedIn and be out in the
Mhm.
space, but I don't think there's a requirement for you to be posting. You could be somebody I know there's a lot of people who lurk and don't necessarily engage, but you should engage and you should talk to people, whether that's one on one. I know a lot of people, I've talked to transitioning teachers who they're very introverted and they just want to have the one on one coffee chat, which does help. But I don't think it's a requirement that you have to go out there and you have to post every day and you have to, say meaningful things every day. I tell people that if there's something you're passionate about, for example, like accessibility, and you know something great about accessibility, or you can create a checklist that people can just take and run with, then do that. Do go in your comfort zone and then post something about it and see where it goes. If it's not something you want to continue doing, then don't do it. But I feel like everybody needs to have a LinkedIn and be out in that space and seeing what's going on in the space because that makes you more aware of what's going on. Even just looking at the job postings that I do or looking at, what's happening in ed tech and, some of the articles and the blogs and getting an idea. Like I could tell you all the L&D people that are the influencers. Like I could list them all out, all the ed tech people. you just know because you're out there and you're looking and you're reading and you're kind of researching.
Yeah, there's an incredible amount of information and learnings that we can actually take away from just like what you're saying, being a lurker. I like to lurk on other platforms as well.
Me too.
And outside, I would say outside of just being on LinkedIn, I also am a big advocate of joining groups,
Hmm.
whether we both are in the same like instructional design group. 'Cause ironically, I was like, oh my gosh, we're also connected on LinkedIn. Look at us over here. But I think that the groups, like if you're on the fence about like what you want to do and where to transition, I think groups are a really great way. Groups of the industry of which you want to join
Yep.
are really great to get a good idea because people are transparently sharing information like tools, tips, obviously AI and all of that, chat GPT is like huge. So you're going to be seeing like trends about those things, but it'll give you a really good window into what the heck these roles even are and what the heck you're going to do because people are going to be sharing and discussing it and having meaningful conversations.
Yeah, and it's so specific, like you said, to the industry. And instructional design is there's so many like the three there's corporate, education, and freelance. Or like maybe you can put nonprofit into its own category as well. So getting to know like what those different sectors are, you can't just say I'm going to be an instructional designer and you don't realize how vast this land is once you step into it. That you have to explore those, and the groups definitely help with that. They help streamline it, narrow it down for you, and you're like, oh, that's how I learned the different areas of instructional design is through the groups, and also the different people who share like this is more applicable to the corporate space. Oh yeah, I'll take that because now I'm an Amazon pharmacy. So I really need more corporate, or I'm in working in higher education. Oh yeah, I'll take that particular resource. So I think the groups definitely narrow it down. And they also, most of them I will say, are a safe space to ask questions that you think like, this is the most ridiculous question ever. But it's really not because other people in the group have the same question. Um, they're just probably not asking it. So be brave enough to put yourself out there. And I think groups are a great space to do that in.
Like I don't think LinkedIn is the right place necessarily to ask a lot of those questions. They can be just depending on like what the question that you're asking, but most times those questions are better served in groups that have the same intention and same
Yeah.
meaning behind that. I also wanted to ask you. So I also had this question the other day of, how should I create my resume? That's like a subset of whatever, but like, how can I really stand out, especially as like an instructional designer? I personally am a really big advocate of having a portfolio.
Hmm.
I think that if you're not going to be posting content, which you don't have to do, just, you engage on LinkedIn or whatever, but I do think a portfolio is something that can easily set you apart from another person. It doesn't matter necessarily what it looks like it could be a Canva presentation, who cares? It could
Hmm.
be a website. I don't think the medium through which you create the portfolio necessarily is the thing. I think the way that you showcase yourself through your portfolio is important.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And having a portfolio, I mean, mine is nothing to like gloat about. It's like a Google Drive with screenshots, you know, and but that shows like what I'm really passionate about, like designing those learning experience. And a portfolio is a dynamic, you know, resource. It's always changing. I think a block for people is they try to get it to that perfect stage, which doesn't exist because you're gonna be having different learning experiences as you matriculate through these different career spaces, and then you're like, oh, this would be a really good item to add to my portfolio. And also to talk about the resume a little bit, the resume is such a static document. I don't know who the person is. I know all about you professionally, like you've done a lot of great things. And I've been on a lot of different hiring committees, especially in higher ed, where the resumes have come in. I've ranked who is number one to me and 1 to 5 or whatever. And then they come to the interview and it kind of shifts. Like the person that I rank last actually becomes first because of who they are and their personality and how they would fit with our culture. So one of the things that I tell people to do is that you need to have some kind of like dynamic video. You need to have something on your resume besides the portfolio and besides your LinkedIn that kind of speaks to who you are. Because I want to know you before you come into the interview, and the resume doesn't give me that. It does not give me that. And you can be any person off the street, and I don't know, But when I see a video or I hear stuff about you, maybe an audio file, that gives me an idea of like your personality, your likeness, or you're funny or you're sarcastic, or that kind of stuff. The resume really doesn't do that.
No, it just checks a box for what you
Yeah.
need to do. Unfortunately, it's just a way to quantify what you're able to do and how you're able to do it. I think portfolios have a place on LinkedIn in some way, shape, or form, because when a recruiter's coming, they can easily pop it up.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying about a video. I've not told necessarily people to do that. I usually say, try to write like a really nice cover letter that like talks a little bit about you. But I like the idea of like a dynamic video. I think that's, if I were on a hiring committee and somebody had a video and they're like telling me a little bit about themselves, that would save me so much time, because you're right about the
Yeah.
resumes. You rank them and you're like, oh, okay. And then they start telling their story and you're like, oh,
I like that it just doesn't fit. It's not a
no,
fit. It's not anything bad. It's
no.
just like this person, I thought they would be this. It's like when you
Hmm.
read a book and you envision what the character looks like, and then they cast a person in the movie and you're like, that's not who I envisioned
Yeah.
at all.
Always. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of
Yep.
that situation. So I feel like the video or the audio or just something to make it more human level sets, and like, oh, we're making this sort of connection here.
Yeah.
And I actually had somebody recently in my little community that I have. She sent the video to somebody and she's in the final round interview right now
It's amazing. Yeah.
because of the video.
There are just ways to like, level yourself up a little bit within the playing field. And I think getting creative is a really good way to do it. Like put yourself out there. That's what I say. Like I know it's risky and it seems scary, but instructional design, customer success, like this world is becoming very saturated very quickly, people trying to transition. So what can you do to set yourself apart? So I love that perspective. Before we talk about tips or tricks, like your lasting tips and tricks for job changers, you do
Mhm.
have a podcast, if the
I
people are
do.
not also familiar, in addition to, the postings and things that you do on LinkedIn. So do you want to talk a little bit about your podcast and like, what your goals and, kind of celebrations that you have for that?
Absolutely. We're actually, it's funny that we're talking now. We're coming up on 2 years of the
Oh my
podcast this
gosh.
month. So I'm really excited about that because they say most podcasts, quote unquote, fail in the first year. So we're going on 2 years of it. I started the podcast EdUP Edtech as a way for people to tell their stories, especially, I've always loved educational technology and in the classroom, but I also wanted to get what's out on the peripheral across the globe, like bring in all the different areas that exist with ed tech. And I feel like sometimes people don't understand why the founder or the person that created this tech did it. A lot of them have stories to share about educational experiences they had, good or bad, that prompted them to develop this tool or something. They've done research and they see a gap in the industry, so they develop insert said tool here. So it really became a podcast that was started for storytelling, but it's kind of morphed into to more of this like beyond storytelling. It's a way for people to get their information out there, because I don't know if people know this, but there's like 1,400 ed tech companies just in the United States, and there's more worldwide. And you're like, you think about that, you're like, no, I didn't realize, because you always hear about the big ones, and I'm not going to mention any of them, but these other ones that have like more of these intricacies, and they're really looking at the learner experience or community. Like I love highlighting those tools that I didn't know about. And that's great, especially if a school's looking for a certain like tool that maybe the big tools don't have that feature. And this is something they were really searching for. When you have accessibility conversations, I've had people on there to develop mental health apps. It's just everything. It's like a whole database of like ed tech tools that you can go to and say, oh, I want to learn more about this. So that's really why I started it. And that's why it continues to grow. Like I didn't even know, we're ed tech. We love ed tech. We always think we have our foot in, like, we know this space. And then something pops up. I'm like, I've never heard of this.
Hmm.
Never ever heard of this.
Yeah, it's amazing how many products there are and just the different things that are out there that we don't know about, even like small startups.
Yeah, that too. Like that
Yeah.
space of like how people support ed tech startups is really interesting and intriguing. Like I did an episode with Ash, but he does EdTech Startup Week and he's amazing. Like I just can't believe all that goes into the round funding and rounds, and I'm like, this is
I
insane.
know. It's
But it's
it's a very crazy world.
Mhm.
And the hustle that's involved to like do that is always really, really
Yeah, it's a lot of work. People don't realize like these founders, they I think there's a common misconception that like people who founded ad tech companies are like living, they're going out on yachts and they're like living in mansions. They are totally not. Most of them reinvest the money right back into developing the tools or hiring more staff or more support. They are not making millions off this. They're doing it because there's some sort of passion behind it and they want to change education. They want to leave some sort of legacy there. So I haven't talked to any millionaires yet.
yeah. And if they are, then it's, it's after many, many,
Many.
many, many years of
Mhm.
not sleeping, sleeping on cots in your,
Working weekends.
yeah. My husband is an entrepreneur as well. And he posted like some, I don't know, some image the other day about empty apartment with like a air mattress on the floor. And I know that so many people that having worked with a lot of startups through the meetup group that I did and whatever, I know that that's how a lot of people do it. They just eat, breathe, and sleep their business.
Yes.
So, yeah. So it's great that you're sharing those stories.
Yeah, I love it. It's so
So
much
just an
fun.
insight for you guys about ed tech. And when you see that on the other side and you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe this product. Just know
Yeah.
a lot of
There's a
blood, sweat, and
story.
tears. Yeah.
There's a
Huge
story.
story behind there. Okay. So to leave everyone and to kind of wrap up our interview today, we would love for you to share any tips or tricks that you have for those teachers or career changers who are looking to make a transition.
That's a loaded question.
I know it
And
is. It's
putting you on
very
the
loaded.
spot.
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. I think, there's a lot of people out there that are giving tips too. And I know one of the things Tim Slade said recently in one of his webinars is there's a lot of clutter to kind of sort through. I think one of the things, if you're transitioning out of education, is to figure out what sector you want to go into. Because if you don't, just like if you're taking a test or you're learning a new subject, if you don't have like a basic understanding of what direction you're going in, is it corporate? Do you want to do a little bit of freelance to get your feet wet? Do you want to do maybe just jump from K to 12 to higher ed in instructional design or customer support? You need to figure that out first before you start. Teachers are very task oriented. They're like, I need to update my resume. I need to make my portfolio. I need to go in the Canva. I need to make all the pretty things. You need to figure out where you want to go first and then research and talk. After that, talk to people who are in that space. I love coffee chatting with people because I learn so much about like what they're doing. And they also learn a lot about our world and what we're doing in instructional design. You can kind of give them advice there. So talk to people in the space. I know that's something that has definitely been shared, and then go in and do the updates to your resources and figure out like what you need to tweak and what you need to do. So I think first is finding the path you want to go down. I've heard people say, like teachers are like, I want to be an instructional designer. And then they'll come back to me and they're like, no, I really wanted to be a project manager because I love insert said skills here. So really figuring out where you want to go and where you want to be. I think that's an important first step. And then talk to the people and then update your stuff.
Yeah. I think that I know I harp on this probably more than anyone should. And I honestly don't care. Sorry that I'm going to say it again. You've got to do networking. And
Mm-hmm.
when I mean networking, I mean putting it out there and asking somebody for a coffee chat just to learn about what they're doing, lurking in a group to figure out what the heck something is even about. Because I'm not saying you can't change careers later and you can't have a window of opportunity into something, but if you don't have a clear vision, it's going to be really challenging. I had somebody send me their resume the other day and say, hey, what do you think? First thing I noticed, their tagline has 10 different things in their tagline. I'm an instructional designer. I'm a project manager. I'm a customer success person. I'm social media strategist. I'm all of these things. And that's great. It's amazing that we're all of those things. Holly and I are both all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Like we do all of those things. But when you're a person looking to bring somebody to your business, I don't really, I mean this in a nice way, but I already have strategists for each of those positions and things. I want to know that you're good at the one thing that you're wanting to do. One, because it makes me know that you're going to be more focused, because the other ones can make it seem like you're not going to be focused on the one role. You're going to be trying to do a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then this person's resume, as soon as I open it, tells me the story of 10 different journeys. And so it's great, but also the same thing. It's not focused. And we want to see you be focused. And so those are really important. And there have been countless times where people have networked with me and they're like, oh, that's what you do. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. It's just,
I can only imagine the
exciting.
plethora of resumes you get because you work at Canva
Oh, ever
and
since I worked at
everybody
Canva,
thinks
it's
you
like
have an
insane.
in.
I know. I'm like, I wish I had a straight line to the
I
recruiters. I'm
know,
sorry
me
I don't.
too. They're like, oh, you work on Amazon. Can you refer me to a job? And I'm
I'm like,
like,
this company's massive, you guys.
I'm
I'm
like,
just a very small, like little puzzle piece in the big journey.
yeah.
Obviously, if it's something direct for my team, that's like a different thing. But
Mhm.
um, just I think what you're saying is just finding that clear like pathway as much as you can.
Mhm.
Every role is significantly different from company to company, but the overall things of what you'll be doing and mastering and things are going to remotely be the same, give or take.
Mhm.
So I think
An
honing in,
LMS is an LMS in
yeah,
corporate and education.
yep,
It's
exactly,
just different names. But
exactly.
yeah, I agree with you. Definitely the focus. And I tell people in my little community, I'm like, you can't go down a street or you can't get to your destination if you don't know the directions and what streets to turn down. You just can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it blind and just hope that it's anomalies when people think that somebody on LinkedIn is going to notice how great you are and then offer you a job on the spot. That never happens. And if it does happen, consider yourself lucky. Never happened to me. I've always
No,
had the network and know people. And I will say this. So we live in a very digital world and we live in this very digital space with a lot of different ways to communicate. But just like in the olden days, it's who you know. It's who you're networking with. Like that will get your foot in the door.
yep,
Like I got into Amazon because I knew somebody that worked there and they referred me to the position. I didn't get the job the first time, but that helped me understand what Amazon was in the ecosystem and how the recruitment and all that stuff works. I'm very grateful for that. And that's because I reached out or because I made a friend, you know? And when you have to, and I also caution you too, don't, I cannot stand it when people do this when they sell me their pitch right from the beginning and they want something from me right away. And I'm like, that I'm not going to review your resume. I'm not a resume writer. I can give you some advice, but tell me a little bit more about you. What's your story? What are you looking to do? I understand you're burnout as a teacher, but tell me more about that. What led you to this decision? I want genuine and deep connections with people. I don't want the
hmm,
surface level stuff
yeah,
because that only gets you so far. So
yeah,
genuinely kind of, get to know me before you
hmm,
start like asking of me
yeah.
to
And
do things.
please read content. Like and Holly was just saying, she's one of her posts to like compile a job posting takes a minimum of like 50 minutes. So just think about that. So if we do that and then you come to us and be like, hey, do you know of any jobs?
Yep.
Which
Sorry.
happens. Okay. It just
Yeah.
is a thing that's going to happen and people don't read it. And I'm like, oh, and my favorite is the in mail where like you're not even connected, and then you're asking this question. It's like, one, I just wonder how that even works. I need to do some more research into that, but it just has to be intentional. Like I have to know
Yeah.
that you know a bit about it, you know a bit about me, like, these things aren't just built overnight and I'm happy to give you tips and all of those things, but if
Mhm.
you just unpromptedly send me a resume or hey, how can I make my transition happen?
Yeah,
Those aren't
like
good
that.
questions. They're not good
No.
questions. A good question would be, "Hey, Holly, I've seen that you recently transitioned to Amazon Pharmacy. I would love to know what your day to day looks like because I'm also looking to explore working in the corporate instructional design." Like, that's a
Yep.
good question,
Right.
you know? Or
I
what are
need to
your
know a
top
little
5
bit.
tips within that
Yeah.
role? But be intentional because it takes a long time to craft these responses too. Like, I
Mhm.
want it to be personal for you. I'm not just going to be like, "Oh, pay." Here's a blog post. Why don't you read this? Like, I want to be intentional with my responses too. So if you're intentional, I'll be intentional.
Yeah, and it's genuine too. Like human connection is just something that you can't replace that.
Yeah, this isn't
Like
Tinder,
it's not
you know?
100%. This isn't speed dating ID style. And I love all the people that message me and ask me such wonderful questions. But
Mhm.
again, like you said, be intentional. Know a little bit about me. Like people ask me what I do. They ask me what I do. I'm like, it's right there on my LinkedIn profile, what I do. You know, how long have you been in ID? It's right there. You
Mhm.
know, just take
I
a
know
little
it's
peek.
yeah, and I know they're trying to spark conversation and they think
Yes.
that's the right way because they're not sure how to do it. So it's just
Yeah.
that intent, think about like if literally think about if you're dating, like you just swipe right. The very first thing that you do is not say, "Do you want to come and meet me right now?"
Mm-hmm.
Like you ask a few questions about each other and you get to know each other. And if it doesn't work, then you don't meet up. If you met up with every person that you just swiped right on, you would be one, very, very busy and B, probably very disappointed
And
also.
very broke if you're
Yeah,
paying for the
exactly.
date.
It can be really bad for everybody. So just think,
Yeah.
just think about
Yeah.
those things
Yeah.
as you guys are going through.
Yeah.
Well, Holly, I've definitely really, really enjoyed this and jamming out with a fellow podcaster. It's always
Me
so
too.
smooth and seamless. What is the best way for people who are looking to connect with you to find you?
LinkedIn is my jam. I'm always on there and you can find me there all that times a day. That's the best way to connect with me. Follow me, connect. It doesn't matter. I still have enough connections if you want to do that connection. So LinkedIn is definitely the best place to find me.
Great. Well, all of our resources and things we've talked about today will be linked in the show notes, a little bit about Holly if you missed any of those types of things. But Holly, we have very, very much enjoyed spending today with you.
I've enjoyed today as well. I could probably talk to you for a few more hours.
Yeah, we just like on the mic. Hot.
We have to cut it off. We know as podcasters.
Sorry, everyone. We have to end this for you. And we will see you guys all next time. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. You've made it this far. We are so thankful that you're here. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, comment below, and join us for all of our next videos. Thank you so much for joining us as we disrupt education together. See you guys soon. Bye, everybody.